everyone loves to see those cases that come in at less than $100, but so many times they struggle to get, I don't know, average, and in most cases are below average when it comes to thermals and features. Does this ring true for the Deepcool CG540? It's a mid-tower case that has a cool front tempered glass panel, or mesh if you get its twin brother, but just how cool is that front panel? Well, let's find out right now, right here on Robeytech. What makes a case a good case? Let's see. There are looks, of course, enough space to build in and put all the components in, oh, and of course thermals, right? Can't forget about those. With an almost infinite number of cases out there ranging from DIY PC series that go from $30 to $40 on Newegg, all the way to the Corsair 4000D or 5000D ranging from $100 to $160, even all the way up to your Lian Li Odyssey X that retails right now for $450. Let me introduce you to the Deepcool CG540. It's a mid-tower case that has a pretty awesome looking front panel and is competing for your dollar with a pretty good price as it retails for about $90 on Newegg. Now, mid-tower cases are a dime a dozen. They're everywhere, even at this price. So let's see what, if anything, sets this thing apart from the rest, shall we? For starters, the case comes in one color, and that's black. So if you have all of those white Corsair Q0120s with the Gigabyte Vision motherboard and Vision GPU, then you may want to look elsewhere for aesthetic purposes. Unless you like the fact that you'll have like white parts inside of a black case and you want to do that new popular and very trendy Panda build combination, which we did build a version of that for Lauren when we did the remake for Cliff Bleszinski's Game Room, which you can check out right here. Now the case weighs a modest 16.5 pounds and checks in roughly at 18 inches deep, 9 inches wide, and 18.5 inches tall, which is right around the size of the 4000D Airflow from Corsair. Taking a tour around the outside of the case, you'll see three main materials that make up the case: ABS plastic, SPCC steel, and your tempered glass, of course. Now Deepcool has also included magnetic dust filters on the front and the top. The front I/O panel has your power button, two USB 3 ports, a mic and audio combo jack, and an LED button that will control the ARGB fans that the case comes with. The other thing that's really cool is the case also comes with an ARGB hub that the fans are plugged into. Pretty awesome. Now, you do have the option of unplugging the 320mm ARGB fans from the front button and plugging them directly into your motherboard to control with lighting from things like Gigabyte Fusion, MSI Mystic Light, for instance. Now there's no front panel USB-C on this case, which is understandable given the price coming in at around $89, though we'd love to see just how much this component costs, because we've seen like a lot of cases starting to omit this, and it doesn't feel like it would be that expensive. Now sticking with the outside of the case, we come to the front tempered glass panel. It may look like it's an Airflow design with like the plus pattern from top to bottom, but it definitely is full tempered glass. For the Deepcool's Airflow version of this case, check out the CG560 from them, which you can see a link down in the description below. Now lastly, we come to the back of the case. Individual PCI slots baffles are removable and reusable. Great touch. In fact, we've had so many of these budget cases that this is a nice little premium feature that makes this a whole lot better. Now, I did mention that it comes with three ARGB 120mm fans in the front, as well as it comes with a 140mm non-RGB fan in the rear as well. Now, are they doing this because the front panel is all glass despite its cool looking front panel design? Potentially, but we'll get into thermals in just a little bit. Now, staying on the subject of fans, as we venture into the inside of the case, the front can hold up to 320mm fans or two 140, the top can hold two 120s or two 140s, and the rear is a single 120 or a single 140. For radiators or AIOs, you have the same setup as fans. For the front, you can do either up to a 360mm or 280mm. For the top, you can do up to 280mm, and for the rear, up to 140mm. Remember, that's both fans and radiators. So you have plenty of options for cooling with an AIO, or if you wanted to do a custom loop. Though I don't know why you do a custom loop inside of an $89 case, but you do you, baby. But Robey, I have an air cooler. No problem. This case supports up to 175mm CPU air coolers, so coolers like that massive Cooler Master Air MA620M will fit, as well as Deepcool's own AK620, which is the one that we used in this build to test our thermals on. Now shifting over to the motherboard, you can put anything from a mini ITX all the way up to eATX, so your massive boards like that MSI Z690 Godlike, all the way down to the ROG Strix B550i will fit with zero problems. Now everyone's favorite subject, GPUs. What GPU can I fit in this case, Roby? Well, you can fit any GPU up to 380 millimeters inside this case, so your GPUs like the 3080 Ti or 3090 Strix, which kind of fills out at 319 millimeters, will totally fit. Now on to power supplies. This case houses any power supply up to 160 millimeters in length, so your PSUs like your Corsair RM850X will fit in here, but beware of the HDD cage underneath the case that supports two 3.5-inch hard drives. But if you are not using it, you might as well be better just taking it out so to give yourself some extra room for your cables. Maybe even take a look at the new G6 series from EVGA and their Supernova line. Those PSUs are smaller and will be better to fit if you choose to leave the cage in. Staying on the storage aspect of the case, we did mention that there are two 3.5-inch HDDs that you can install via cage underneath. You can also house two 2.5-inch SSDs on the backside of the motherboard tray, so plenty of room for storage options. Just note you will need to mount the drives before adding the motherboard, as the motherboard installation blocks the mount screws for adding in the SSDs. This is one of those budget things, and I've seen this on other budget cases. Now, a couple things worth mentioning too about this case. The rubber grommets that are on the motherboard tray for cable management are rather nice in quality and look good too. The case also looks to include places to mount optional GPU sag brackets, but not sure which kind, and there wasn't really any additional information on the website. All right, so we've covered all of the specs of the Deepcool CG540. Now let's pop into a build and see how the whole process goes. So let's go through the parts we're using in today's build. So we're using the Ryzen 5 5600X. We're gonna be throwing this inside of the B550 Aorus Pro AC. For the cooling, this is from Deepcool. This is their AK620. For storage, we're gonna be using that Intel SSD, the 670. 32 gigs of XPG Spectrix D50, Deepcool 750M V2L. For our GPU, we're using the EVGA 3060 Ti FTW3. Oh yeah, you got lots of ASMR coming out of this one. There we go. Do 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 do. So Ryzen 5 5600X in. There we go. And there is the cooler itself. Look at this cooler. It's so cool. And it does just fit, which is good. Okay, now it is in right. So you can see there's a little bit of a pattern in the glass. So you can still see through it. It's not for airflow. It looks like it's just for show. Looks like it's gonna fit no problem. Okay, well, so you're gonna have to remove the 140 to put in a motherboard. That's annoying. Okay, so there you go. All of our motherboard screws are in now. Okay, everything is plugged in. Now we're just gonna pull it tight. So these are all the cables we have to really worry about too, which is actually kind of interesting. Okay, nice clean cable management. Now we can get our GPU out. There we go, nice, simple. Let's plug in our cables now. There we go. Cables are clean, look good, everything's plugged in. Okay, there we go. On and on. Woo! Look at that. Well, there you go, folks. Full build in the case, but how was it, Roby? To be honest, average, which I think is pretty good given the price point. Usually when I build in a case like this, there has a tendency to be a little bit more budget, and you have a lot of gotchas that really kind of take away from the building experience. But not so much in this case. I mean, the biggest two complaints I have is the fact that you do need to install the SSDs before you put in the motherboard, which is something I'd already warned you about, and having to remove the rear fan in order to fully install the motherboard, which honestly is pretty minor. For the price, you do get quality rubber grommets. You also get tie downs for cable management. I mean, sure, it's not Phanteks or Corsair solutions, but I mean, those cases are a lot more expensive, and that makes sense. Realistically, I like that I really didn't hit any roadblocks, and outside of the 2 earlier mentioned problems, the build went very smooth. Which again, is a good sign, specifically given the price point. But smooth building is only the beginning of a PC's journey. I mean, great, the build goes in okay, but what about how it will perform thermally? Well, let's get the hot take on this, shall we? Well, hopefully not hot. Maybe warmer, like these awesome new era Robitech jackets that you can pick up for 30% off over at robitechstore.com. So thermals in our Deepcool CG540 using an AMD Ryzen 5 5600X and an EVGA RTX 3060 Ti FTW3 were as follows. First up, we have our CPU, which, when sitting idle, nothing too alarming here. In fact, it all looked nice and mild as the CPU is sitting at a nice and frosty 32 degrees in the open case and an only slightly warmer 35 in the closed case. When we decide to push this 5600X beyond the realm of normal usage and really try to heat things up, we see things pop up to about 74 degrees in the open case scenario and an almost 10 degree warmer temperature of 83 degrees in the closed case scenario. To be honest, these temperatures are not too bad, and dare I say, better than I had originally anticipated. So what about the GPU then? How did that fare, Roby? It fared thee well. Little ye olde English humor there. Well, anyway, at idle, the GPU wasn't having much of an issue staying frosty as we see it hanging out in the high 30s at 37 in the open case scenario and an only slightly warmer 40 degrees in the closed case scenario. When we start rendering our 3D images of our amazing build map, which is finally available, by the way, over at robitechstore.com, things got a little warmer, sitting at 68 in the open case scenario and 4 degrees warmer at 73 in the closed case scenario. Again, very reasonable temps given the tempered front glass, and both the CPU and GPU fared better than we had originally anticipated. So wrapping it up on thermals, we are impressed with the thermals given the nature of the case, with the front panel being what it is, tempered glass. It looks like the spacing at the front is allowing for fans to get the air, and those stock fans are doing a good job of getting air to the components like that air-cooled AK610. I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing an air-cooled build in a case like this, but if you had to, it's cool to see that it wasn't actually all that bad. Also, kudos to that twin tower AK620, which with its 2 fans is also doing a good job of keeping things cool for that 5600X. So thermals are okay, better than we had anticipated, but nothing really to write home about. So what about the build we put inside of the Deepcool CG540? Great question. Well, first up, let's talk about single-player NVIDIA-tuned experiences with this AMD Ryzen 5 5600X and an EVGA RTX 3060 Ti for the Win 3. For Tomb Raider running at 1440p with DLSS on the highest preset, we saw an average frame rate of 152 across the runs we did on the game. For Metro Exodus, also running at 1440p with ray tracing on high and DLSS set to ultra performance, this is a slight change from what we used in the past. We saw an average FPS across our runs of 68.78. Now let's talk about some of those AMD single player experiences. First up, Dirt 5 at 1440p with ultra high graphic settings, we saw an average frame rate of 90.7. Lastly, and rounding out the single player experiences, was Borderlands 3 running at the highest graphical preset. We saw an FPS average of 70.25, close for some high frame rate shooter action, and you have some settings to play with if you want to get north of 120 FPS, but no issue if you're happy with 60 FPS playing single player. So what about multiplayer? Well, for Apex Legends, running on low visual settings at 1440p, optimized for competitive settings, and high frame rate, we saw an average frame rate of 212.5 FPS. Zero issues here. For Call of Duty, again on low visual settings, 1440p, optimizing for high frame rate, we saw 184.5. Finally, for Fortnite, again at 1440p on low visual settings and competitive play, you're sitting at a very fluid 364.6 FPS. No issue there at all. So Roby, what are your final thoughts? There is nothing that really stands out about this case, outside of maybe that cool pattern on the glass at the front. The experience when building in the Deepcool CG540 has those budget moments, but there are some good additions from the team at Deepcool that do keep the case from feeling super cheap. The case itself is fine. The thermals are better than anticipated, and that's a good thing. The thing is, there isn't really anything that makes this case stand out from the crowd. So if you found this case and you like it, well then, hopefully this review gave you some points to help you build and you're happy with the choice of the case afterwards. But it's not always about what I think. It's also about what you think. What did you think of the Deepcool CG540? Did you have a favorite feature? Do you like the way it looks? Does that front panel glass enough to get you interested in it? Would this even be a case you would consider? I would love to know all of those things down in the comments below. Now, while you're down there, make sure you slap that subscribe button, whip that like button, and ring that notification bell so you get a notification each and every time we post a new video or go live right here on Robitech. If you have questions about this case or any other tech-related questions, then check out our amazing Discord server filled with other tech and PC enthusiasts that love to share their thoughts and ideas on these very subjects. Looking for cheap tech? Then check out @robotechdeals.com or @robotechdeals on Twitter, where we have our guy Tom scouring the internet for the best deals on tech, PC components, TVs, games, you name it. Finally, you can also follow me and my entire team on all the socials @Robotech everywhere. We hope you enjoyed this video, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.